Allen & Company wishes OOIDA and all members a safe, healthy, and joyous holiday season.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
A federal court has granted class action status to a lawsuit accusing Swift Transportation of failing to pay overtime to employee drivers living in Washington state. Jamie Jones of Landline Magazine joins the show to discuss. Ever wonder whether federal regulators are thinking about you and other small business owners when they craft new regulations? A bill that just passed the House would force them to. Its sponsor, Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota, returns to the program to discuss his bill. Since 2018, Shell has worked to show truckers how they can make their rigs more fuel efficient. We'll learn more about the company's Starship and how it's a learning experience for engineers and drivers. And finally, Marty Ellis has been thinking about Christmas, and he's offering some suggestions for gifts you can get the trucker in your life. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. But first, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. A federal court has granted class action status to a lawsuit accusing Swift Transportation of failing to provide overtime pay to employee drivers who live in Washington state. Here to discuss the case and its implications is Jamie Jones, managing editor of Landline Magazine. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Hey, you're welcome, Scott.
Let's start with the lawsuit before we zoom out to the big picture here. This starts with a lawsuit filed by a Swift driver named David Carlson. He says the company violated the state's overtime pay laws. Let's start with those laws to begin with here so we kind of understand what we're talking about here, Washington state's overtime laws in particular.
All right. So Washington state law requires companies to pay employees 1.5 times, the typical overtime structure of their regular rate for time worked beyond 40 hours a week. Okay? Straightforward. Mm-hmm. However, an exemption applies to interstate truck drivers if and I'm going to use air quotes here, the compensation system, this is where it starts getting complicated, is, again, air quotes, reasonably equivalent to that overtime pay requirement. So even though they've got the class action status and there's moving forward, the devil is going to be in the details on this particular lawsuit on how everything goes from here.
And this is where it gets sticky because, as we know, truck drivers often, especially company drivers and especially Swift Transportation drivers, it's a pay-by-the-mile system, right? So we're talking about hours here on one metric and we're talking about miles driven on the other. Mr. Carlson is essentially claiming that he's not being paid for all the hours that he's working, but I'm assuming that the lawyers, when they get a hold of this, are going to start getting into the nitty-gritty of exactly what the system is, right? Yeah,
and, legal definitions are where a lot of cases are won and lost at this point. And so, when we talk about a compensation system that's reasonably equivalent to the overtime pay requirement, Swift is already on record in the court documents saying that their truck drivers typically work more than 40 hours a week, as truckers do, but that it sets its mileage-based pay rate to include overtime compensation. So, again, we're back to what is considered overtime compensation, and that's going to be key in this particular case.
Right, and also key is the fact that this is now a class action lawsuit, or it's being allowed to be given a class action status, because it won't just be David Carlson. It's going to be other Swift Transportation drivers involved in this now, which makes the case obviously even bigger.
Oh, 100%, because it's going to, and that's another definition that will have to get worked out in the end, because it will apply to Washington-based drivers, so who are employed by Swift. And then, how the court defines that could be good or bad for either side, because Swift pointed out in the court documents that the drivers who live in Washington state spend the vast majority of their time outside of the state. Right. So we have that. And most drivers who live in Washington are assigned a home terminal either in Lewiston, Idaho, or Troutdale, Oregon. So their home base isn't even in the state. So, and I don't think this is an oversight or coincidence or anything. Neither Idaho or Oregon have overtime pay laws similar to Washington. So,
exactly.
I don't think Swift just threw a dart at a map and said, well, Lewiston it is.
They know what they're doing.
There's some strategy to this.
Yeah.
Tyson Fisher, our associate editor, is the one who's actually covering this and has done a fabulous job. There's a 4-pronged test. There's a lot to it that you can look at this particular case on landline.media. But, I have a hard time when it comes to things like Swift's arguments because there have been so many wage lawsuits levied at the state level by truck drivers that if these motor carriers were truly baking in overtime compensation into their pay-by-the-mile model or whatever, you wouldn't be having as many of these lawsuits as what you're seeing.
Right.
And, driver pay has been an issue for decades when they used to be paid on hub miles, where it was actually the number of miles driven from dock to dock. And then it went to practical miles because they claimed drivers were abusing that system and going out of route and just adding miles. And, and then we had zip code to zip code pay, and that was ridiculous. So, driver pay has been problematic pretty much since driver pay has been in existence. So it's not surprising to see this. You have a state like Washington, though, that really does have a lot of workers' rights laws on the books. So it will be interesting to see how the federal courts applies those state laws and those definitions in this case. And that could be, like I said, depending on how those definitions work out, will really tell a lot about who will have the upper hand once we actually get to trial on this, if it makes it to trial.
Yeah, and we can zoom out with this conversation, too, to talk about the Got Truckers Act, which would guarantee overtime pay for truck drivers. This is a bipartisan bill, right? It's very much an issue that will continue to be on the radar there. But this would alleviate a lot of the things that we're talking about here. And we'll see where it goes. But it's worth mentioning that it ties in there.
It really does. And what it will do, because you have a situation like the Washington State, Idaho, Oregon, where the laws are so different, that if you had a federal law dictating overtime for truck drivers, that would throw that blanket out there and get rid of the patchwork that drivers could face on getting fair compensation and hopefully a living wage out of the deal. So, Representative Troy Nehls signed on this week, and he became the second Republican. Jeff Andrew actually introduced the Got Truckers Act. We have Mark Tonko and Andrea Salinas, who are both Democrats. So it's really encouraging, especially in this political climate, in this everything that's going on, to see both sides come together and say, you know what, we need to rethink what's going on here with the exemption of overtime pay for truck drivers because we want them to have a livable wage.
Paying truck drivers for all the time they work. What a novel concept.
Such a novel approach.
Yeah. Fightingfortruckers.com, the website. You can still reach out to your lawmakers to urge them to get on board. That's important to do. Help them understand this issue. Jamie, thank you for helping us understand this issue, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Oh, you're welcome, Scott.
That was Jamie Jones of Landline Magazine. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Charles R. Parr of Mount Jewett, Pennsylvania. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 18 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 135 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rutella. Next, Congressman Brad Finstad joins the program to talk about his bill to force regulators to consider small business concerns. And Ashley Blackford discusses Shell's latest Starship truck with Ryan Manthiri. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, Look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit CapitalReman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. If you've ever wondered whether federal regulators are thinking about you and other small business owners when they craft new regulations, you're not alone. So did Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota, which is why he introduced something called the Prove It Act. The bill just passed the House, and Representative Finstad joins us now to discuss that, along with other trucking issues. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've got Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine here as well. Mark, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
Congressman, congrats, first of all, on passage of the Prove It Act. Must feel good.
Yeah, it is. It is encouraging to know that hope is on the horizon. That some sanity in our government and some certainty for our small businesses across this country. Have desperately needed things like this. So I'm excited to see some momentum building here.
Yeah, and I know we certainly want to talk about that momentum as we enter 2025 and kind of talk about what that looks like. But with regard to the Prove It Act in particular, to begin with here, we spoke with you, I think, earlier this year when you first introduced the bill. Now it's passed the House. For those listening who may not be familiar, can you talk a little bit about what your bill aims to do?
Yeah, so for the listeners here today that maybe don't know who I am, I'm a farmer from South Central Minnesota. I'm one of the few members of Congress that has a CDL. I haul my grain to market. I have kind of lived kind of the American dream, fourth generation farm, and have seen firsthand just the complexity and, quite frankly, the insanity of government regulation, and how a lot of times we like to point our fingers at the lawmakers and say, you just need to create a different law, or you need to pass a law to fix this. And what we see over and over and over again, it's really where the rubber hits the road for small businesses across this country is really the regulations and the enforcement and the paperwork and the hoops and loops that our government bureaucracy puts on us. And so the Prove It Act is really just saying, listen, when we pass laws in Congress and the executive branch takes over the regulatory rulemaking and then the enforcement of those rules, that they have to take into account that if there will be a cost to small businesses, if there'll be a cost to the people of our country, maybe unintended or intended, and they need to then, report those costs, report those findings, and give businesses an opportunity to dispute those costs and findings, and get Congress more engaged in the rulemaking process and really what it means. In the Biden administration alone, we've seen over $1.8 trillion of costs just in the regulatory compliance area, and over 340 million hours of paperwork that it's cost our small businesses just to comply with some of these insane hoops and loops that our government puts on it. So the Prove It Act to me is just kind of a common sense farmer approach. Like, you know what, if you're going to pass a law and the bureaucrats are going to make that law have so many hoops and loops and turns and twists, and it's going to create, a small business like my farm to engage a lawyer to even figure out how we do it, maybe it's not the best way to go about rulemaking and lawmaking in our country. So we need to put the power back to our people, the power back to small businesses to do what they do best. Obviously, we're going to be in compliance, and we're going to do the best that we can to, live up to the responsibilities that we have. But this government overreach in the regulatory process has to stop. And that Prove It Act makes it very clear that the bureaucrats need to be on notice that we're paying attention.
Hi, Congressman. This is Mark Schrimmer from Landline Magazine. And as we talked about, the Prove It Act has passed the House. Obviously, it'd be difficult for it to get all the way through the Senate and signed by President Biden before the end of this legislative session. But what does this show that the House was able to pass this? What does this mean for when this bill would obviously be likely reintroduced in the next session and have the chances of actually being signed into law by President Trump?
Yeah, so it's very encouraging. I mean, there's momentum that has been built by us passing this in the House. And by the way, it was a bipartisan vote. We had a couple Democrats come on board. And I think that's a good sign that, government efficiencies is not just a Republican interest, that there is some Democrats interested in making our government more reflective of we the people. And so this is, really kind of the first step of creating some momentum. This speaks very well with the Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's Doge efforts to make government more efficient. And I think what we see then is that momentum carrying over into the 119th and, having conversations with the Senate now, knowing that they have seen that we can pass it in the House. They will stand up and pay attention. I think we have a good opportunity to move quickly on it in the 119th Congress.
And as we look ahead to 2025 and beyond, as you kind of allude to there, the political climate obviously is going to change here. Some of the regulations that are already in place, truck drivers in particular, all these EPA emission standards that have come out and really drawn the ire of the trucking industry, are those a type of things that we might see, stopped from actually going into effect in the future based on the Prove It Act? What other kinds of regulations do you kind of, see that are out there that may be a good example, I guess, for the Prove It Act to kind of strike down?
Yeah, I mean, I think the emission standards obviously are on the table. I think all of the unnecessary costs that were put onto, all of our small businesses, whether it's, the government juice we have to add to our tractors, that, the whole DEF and what it's done to, to my John Deere tractors and quite frankly, the cost of operating my farm, to all of the different crazy standards that really are sold to us as like, we're saving the planet. This is changing the world, where you actually don't even see the dial being moved in regards to some of the so-called intended purposes of some of these regulations. And so, I would just tell your audience, like, everything's on the table. Bring your ideas to your members of Congress. We have an opportunity, a generational opportunity to really kind of reset the deck in regards to common sense within our government. And so, obviously, none of us want to leave our backyard worse than we found it. We always want to push ourselves to do better, to be better stewards of the land, better stewards of our equipment and our economy and our businesses. But it has to be done in a way that makes sense and that is fiscally feasible, because what we're seeing is, a lot of small businesses that are being pushed out of business because of the regulatory climate. They can't afford the regulations. They can't afford the time it takes for all of the paperwork to be compliant. And quite frankly, what happens then is those costs then are put onto the consumer. So every time we put more regulations on the trucking industry, for instance, I try to tell people in the simplest forms that, if it costs $100 more because of the regulatory climate to haul a truckload of chicken nuggets to McDonald's, well, that $100 is going to be pushed onto the consumer. And before you know it, it's going to be $10 for a 6-piece chicken McNugget meal because of all of the unnecessary costs that have been inflicted into that whole supply chain. And so we as government need to take into account that, this might feel good, this might sound good, but there is the economic reality. And that economic reality is really strangling the average everyday American right now. And, the election, if anything, spoke loud and clear. The people spoke loud and clear that the economy is not working for everybody. And we have to take a look at any and everywhere that we can within our government to see where are we actually making it harder for our citizens to flourish. And the regulatory front seems to be like low-hanging fruit. Heard it from a lot of your listeners. I've heard it from the farm community, and I've heard it from people all over southern Minnesota and all over the country. So I would say now is the time for your industry, for our industry to engage. If you have an idea that just or an issue that just doesn't make sense, a regulation that doesn't make sense, you don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, or quite frankly, bring examples of this is the reality of what this harebrained idea is costing us, bring it to your member of Congress, because we have an opportunity right now to really kind of interject common sense into our government.
Speaking of a rollback of regulations, the current administration had made a push to mandate speed limiters on commercial motor vehicles. The Drive Act would actually stop FMCSA from doing that. I know that is a bill that you signed on as a co-sponsor of. And I think in your quotes kind of mentioned about being a farmer and driving a semi as you did here as well. Maybe talk a little bit about why you decided to be a co-sponsor of that and why that's maybe another example of a regulation that, isn't kind of fitting the bill for small businesses, specifically truck drivers.
I just try to run everything that comes across my desk through the farmer common sense test. And I've been on the road and I've driven miles and miles and miles. And, the last thing I want is the big nanny state government inside my cab telling me that, you're going to have to, the truck is only going to go 55. And quite frankly, that becomes a safety issue in a lot of different cases. And if you're going to tell me that a government bureaucrat with some sort of regulation is going to dictate the terms upon which my safety in regards to the ability to act quickly, nimbly, flexible, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is an example where it maybe sounds good on paper. And it might make someone feel good, like, well, yeah, there we go. No more 18-wheelers going over 55 miles an hour. Well, I tell you what, we're going to see some challenges and we're going to see some big-time public safety risks if we don't have the ability to maneuver and to handle our equipment in a way that is safe. And again, if you look at this with the assumption that everyone is speeding recklessly and out of control, then you have lost faith and trust in our friends, neighbors, and fellow Americans. And it's time for us to stop and to actually just trust that, we as a country have done amazing things without the heavy hand of government having to lead us by the nose through every step of our life. And, I trust the industry to do what's right. And quite frankly, to me, it's a public safety issue and a common sense issue.
One area in which our listeners would like to see Congress do something is with regard to truck parking. The Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act has been introduced a number of times. It seems to be gaining traction every time it's reintroduced, and I'm pretty certain it's going to be reintroduced next year by Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois. With the truck parking issue in particular, you're a co-sponsor of that bill as well. What are those conversations like with your colleagues? Do you see momentum on that issue as well? Can we feel somewhat confident that we're going to see something happen maybe next year or the year after that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be some wind at our back on this issue. I think there's momentum. And again, to me, it comes down to access, supply chain, moving of goods from A to B and creating a more efficient way for that to happen. Obviously, there's economic impacts, but there's obviously safety impacts. And so I would say if there's some things to your listeners that scream of common sense, you're probably going to see some movement of that right now in the short term. Because we feel like the voters of our country kind of told us that's what they want to see and that's what they expect.
Congressman, before we let you go, we know your time is valuable. Any final message, anything you'd like to say to our truck driving friends out there?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much. Appreciate you. I am honored that you have chosen this profession, and it is an honorable, noble profession. If people like to eat, if people like to do their shopping on Amazon and get their Christmas gifts, they better be thanking a truck driver right now, because everything in this economy moves through all of you. And you are the glue that keeps this country going. And we need to continue to work with you and for you to make sure that you have a bright future, that we are doing things to bring more people into your profession, and that we honor and respect the work that you do. So big old thank you for what you do.
Our thanks once again to Representative Brad Finstad of Minnesota. Landline Now is back after this.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibratech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at VibratechTVD.com.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Vendor choice. Owner-operators rejoice. Truckdown.com.
Landline Now, welcome back. An initiative toward a lower carbon future has been in full swing since 2018. The Shell Starship is an aerodynamic, super fuel-efficient heavy-duty truck. Ryan Muntree is a project leader and research and development engineer for Shell's Global Solutions Technology Group. I recently spoke with him about how the Shell Starship initiative got started back in 2018.
The transport sector is basically fundamental to the global economy. It touches almost every part of our day-to-day lives. It supports economic growth. It's responsible for creating jobs and basically connecting people. Essentially, services such as like healthcare, education, logistics services. So it counts for around, I think, 35% of global energy usage, and on-road freight is about, I think, a third of that total. So it generates about 9% of carbon dioxide globally. That's a big number. And you have these carbon emission regulations that are basically on the horizon. They're absolute emissions from the road sector freight needs to come down by almost 60% by 2050. So if you look at the sector that we support and the scale or the size of decarbonization that's facing it, you start to get a feel for why we launched these types of large-scale demonstrations or impactful demonstrations, like we call them, in these sectors. Most of the sector's emissions are attributed to about, I think there's about 217 million vehicles in operation that supply this global supply chain. And most of that sector's emissions can be attributed to about, I think it's like 63 million or 65 million heavy-duty, medium-duty trucks. And they all have different power and weight and range utilization. So that represents about, I think it's 29% of global fleet and basically on-road freight CO2 emissions. And of all of those trucks, diesel is the primary energy mover. So I think 90% of the fuel used in those trucks is diesel. So basically, as Shell, as we're a global energy provider, and one of our specific mandates is, we have a climate ambition to become a net zero emission energy business by 2050 or sooner. In line with that, we support the transport industry and our customers developing products and solutions that enable greener pathways. So helping these hard-to-abate sectors achieve their own net zero emission targets.
How has the program evolved with each generation over the years?
Basically, it's evolved with the energy transition. You saw in the first two iterations of the truck. In 2018, we launched Starship 1.0, which was a diesel powertrain, primarily because at that point in time, that was the state of the technology that was being utilized in the market. And Starship's always basically been about leveraging and utilizing technologies that are relevant at the time and are most innovative, currently available, which is being basic. If you put an underline under that, it's what's available and what can be utilized now. So with Starship 1.0, which was in 2018, a lot of the technologies featured on the truck were centered around how do we make diesel as efficient as possible. Because at that point in time, there were around 2.5 million trucks in operation supporting logistic services around North America. And all of those were diesel. So we wanted to look at focusing our energy and efforts at making the best of those available utilities and trucks that are on the road now as efficient as possible. So that was 1.0 and 2.0. And then you start to see the sector start to evolve because technology started to progress, infrastructure started to improve. So things like technologies around battery electric vehicles, you're starting to see developments around natural gas. A lot of that basically the progression of that enabled us to start to look at solutions for Starship 3.0 that were focused purely around natural gas. So you see the program, the technologies, the OEMs, the service providers, the SMEs that were involved in helping us develop the truck. It's been a natural progression, but it's always been driven by how the technology and the sector itself has been progressing at the time. This is not focused on the next generation, because that would be programs like that I look at specifically at the time. Well, was looking at hydrogen or hydrogen fuel cell. This for where it's positioned and for each year, because we launched in 2018 was with Starship 1.0, and then in 2020 we launched 2.0, and then on the back of 2022 going to 2023 we launched 3.0, and at each we used the most relevant technology that we felt was pivotal to the sector at that point in time.
Now, with Starship 3.0 powered by a Cummins natural gas engine and using renewable natural gas, what are the environmental benefits compared to a traditional diesel-powered truck?
Natural gas engines have this added benefit of being able to run on renewable natural gas. And RNG is basically it's a biogas. It's a mixture of gases. So it's like 50 to 75% methane, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, sulfide, water, and there's like trace amounts of other gases in there. And this constitutes basically when organic matter, like we take food or animal waste, is broken down by microorganisms in that, and we do this in the absence of oxygen. It's through a process called anaerobic digestion. We then generate this biogas. But at that stage, it still has a fair amount of low value constituents. So things like carbon dioxide, water, hydrogen sulfide, these all need to be removed. So when we do that, when we filter that out, we generate this renewable natural gas. And in that form, when it's processed and filtered, it can be injected directly into the natural gas grid and used as a fuel. So it's pretty fungible in that sense. And CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board, it classifies RNG sourced from dairy manure, which is what we've run Starship 3.0 on, as having a 250% reduction in life cycle greenhouse gases. So when you replace diesel with RNG, so if you took a diesel truck and you replaced it with an equivalent RNG truck running on RNG, you have this added benefit of a 250% reduction in life cycle greenhouse gases. And this all comes from the fact that the methane that's associated, it has a 28 times greater global warming potential. They call it a GWP than carbon dioxide. And what that basically means is the methane is actually more potent than carbon dioxide. And when it's left to its own devices, in the sense that agricultural waste is left to decompose and to expire and to, in the atmosphere without us even touching it, it's a more harmful effect. And repurposing it through this RNG process, through this anaerobic digestion, we're repurposing this waste as green energy or green fuel. So that's where the reduction comes from in the greenhouse gases. That's one benefit. The other is when you burn, whether you're burning natural gas or RNG, renewable natural gas in an engine, it has similar performance characteristics compared to a diesel. It's quieter though. It's much cleaner, and although it's still a fossil fuel, natural gas produces less CO2 emissions in terms of tailpipe emissions. So it requires a smaller after-treatment system, almost no nitrogen oxides, very little particulate matter or volcanic oxide compounds. Those are VOCs. So these low emission technologies, the engines coupled with the fuel, they offer many incentives, not just from a total cost of ownership perspective, but also in terms of, more significantly now in this specifically with where we are in this energy transition, just in terms of the reduced carbon footprint.
I'm curious, how does the Shell Starship 3.0 demonstrate the potential of integrating innovations like aerodynamics, lightweighting, and alternative fuels into the commercial trucking industry?
Yeah, so the truck is, it serves as a platform for showcasing the best of innovative technologies in the market at that point in time. So central to this truck's design is this concept of freight ton efficiency. It's about carrying the most amount of a payload using the least amount of energy. And to do that, we do it through a couple of enablers. There's 4 key design principles that we follow or we try to adhere to when we built the truck. These design principles go heavy on the payload, and that improves our freight carrying capacity and ultimately drives our freight ton efficiency up. There's things like the aerodynamic package, where we try to reduce. This is one of the more significant opposing forces acting on the truck that eats away at fuel economy and effectively reduces our freight ton efficiency. So we look at technologies and components on the truck that we can utilize to help drive down the improve drag reduction. There's things like rolling resistance is another significant opposing force on the truck. This basically refers to the friction that's created by the tire's contact with the road. Basically, when the tire's under extreme loads, and with our truck, we're going very heavy, that repeated flexing of the tire sidewalls, that creates heat. The heat creates friction. The friction is what basically slows down or eats away at our fuel economy because the engine has to work much harder to generate energy to overcome that friction. So we really look to partner with OEMs and suppliers that help us target these areas. So the technologies on the truck itself are dialed in to reducing these specific areas. So with the tires we've partnered with Bridgestone. On the engine itself, obviously Cummins is kind of the leader in terms of natural gas engines. And we utilize their expertise and their hardware to kind of improve on the efficiency of the truck all around. The last element of this is around driver behavior, which is a significant component. It involves not only creating a platform or truck that can be driven by not just a novice driver or an experienced driver, but helping them understand the technology that's available to them and how to leverage it when they're out on the road, giving them the ability to plan and optimize their routes. So there's a lot of key driver aids that are included on the truck that take away some of the guesswork that the drivers have to do when they're out there on the road.
How does Shell envision the future of sustainable freight transport?
These emission abatement targets that are on the horizon. So you've got, I think there's a 80% reduction in CO2 intensity by 2050, and it's less than 30 years to achieve that target. And the global fleet is already starting to transition to these zero emission technologies, like renewable natural gas being one of them. I mentioned hydrogen fuel cell, hydrogen ICE, battery electric vehicles. The challenge with all of this is there's a time to materiality in terms of how quickly we develop it, test it, and de-risk it. Because it's not just the hardware, it has to be properly tested and de-risked. And then you have to have the infrastructure in place to support the customer when it's in the field. So all of that's going to take time. And what Shell is trying to do right now is create solutions that help bridge the gap in the interim. So what can we do right now? That's again what Starship's always been about, is what can we do in the immediate future right now to address the challenges we're having while these technologies come online. Natural gas only became a viable option for us once we knew not just the fuel and the fueling infrastructure was there, but the hardware itself was available, and there was a robust maintenance and fueling infrastructure in place to support the customer. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to roll out this demonstration. So that's a big part of it. And basically, to kind of, a long story short, is that we see a potential demonstration going forward, or any kind of development work we do in this space will always be tied to how the sector is evolving and what's the next step gap in that. How do we take it forward with a platform that's now already in place?
That was Ryan Muntry talking about the Shell Starship. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Marty is at a very old truck stop, and he's been thinking about the Christmas season and the challenge some people who have a trucker in their lives face in trying to find an appropriate Christmas present. So, with that in mind, he's offering a few suggestions, things that any trucker will use every day that you can put under the tree.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
Well, I am doing just fantastic, and you've been getting around a lot lately, haven't you? Where are you at right now?
Absolutely. We are over at TA in Beto Junction, Kansas. That's I-35, exit 155. They have a Country Pride restaurant and a Wendy's and 8 showers along with 226 parking spots. So some nice amenities for our drivers out there.
Yeah, and that's a truck stop that's been there a long, long time before it became a TA and just forever. And in fact, I think at one point that intersection when it was all 2-lane highways was further south, and they started there and then moved up when the interstate came in. So
yeah, that's what I've heard about that one, and I'll be here through the 16th of December.
Well, I guess you also had to stop once, but it wasn't voluntary. What the heck happened?
Well, when I was heading down from Iowa down into back into Missouri, I saw one of the DOT pickups parked in the middle after I got just before I got to Moberly, Missouri, and on 63, and I guess that's a favorite hangout of theirs from what I understand now, and he pulled out right after I went by, so I just had it in my head, yeah, he's probably going to come up and pull me over and, whatever. I knew I wasn't speeding, and, so I thought it would go well. And sure enough, he pulled over, and there were 2 of them in the pickup, and they come up and they were going to do an inspection, just a random inspection, no reason, whatever. And actually, I prefer the states that don't have to have a reason to pull you over, because that way they don't have to say, oh, you were going 1 mile an hour over or whatever, and write that down on the inspection to begin with. So this is fine with me. The guys were very professional. Of course, just like any other truck driver out there, in the back of your head, it's like, I think I did everything right, and everything looks good on the truck when I left. But it's the things that run through your brain when they are doing the paperwork in the vehicle, and so you're just waiting. And it took about 23, 28 minutes, something like that. And so it was taking a while, and so it always gets you a little bit nervous. But all went well, very professional, and 2 very nice guys.
Well, if you got to get pulled over, that doesn't sound like a bad way to have it happen.
No, and that's, to me, you have to be professional yourself, and and they were, so all is well, and it's actually the first time I've been pulled over, in the Spirit, so I guess it was about time.
Okay, I guess it was your turn. Okay, well, let's go on to a topic that is going to be more fun for people who are listening, and I think a lot more fun for you. And that is, you were sending over something I thought was great, which is for people who have loved ones who are truckers, kind of a Christmas list of things that they might want to consider as gifts that would really be good. And give us an idea of some of the things that are on your list.
Yeah, there's so many times, somebody will say, well, what do you want for Christmas? And, your mind goes blank, and it's like, I don't know, to the point in our lives now that if you need it, you just go get it. But I just come up with this list between what I've thought of and what other truck drivers that I've talked to, think that it's always a nice thing to get. And one of them, of course, is a Bluetooth headset, and that keeps everybody legal and, the good communications with family members and friends. And then, of course, work clothing like jackets, that you use in the truck, gloves. We're getting into that really, really cold time, so you just might need those. And if a person doesn't have a good GPS, good quality truck GPS, it's always a great thing to have. A basic set of tools, you can get some of those $100 ones during, the sales before Christmas that have kind of a little bit of everything. And it's just nice to have a good basic set out here. And of course, either a jump starter or jumper cables. Nowadays, they have those nice battery packs that you can jump your truck with in case something happens, or your reefer. So that's always nice to have. And then either an air hose or a little air compressor, more and more that you can get the air compressors that are on the same battery line as, let's say you're a Milwaukee person. You can get one of the air compressors that you could take with you instead of having to hook up the regular air hoses to your glad hands from your truck, which is still an option. But that's always a great possibility. Any of the drill driver, impact drivers, that type of thing, battery operated. Then, of course, either a new tablet, a laptop for, your viewing pleasures out on the road, seat covers for your truck, floor mats. And then I always throw in there an OOIDA membership. I've given out memberships as gifts, whether it's Christmas or birthdays. It's always a good thing and something that maybe somebody won't do on their own quite yet. You can do it for them. And then, of course, you can always make a donation in somebody's name, whether it's to Truckers Final Mile, Road Angel Trucker Center, St. Christopher's, Truckers for Troops, that type of thing. And, of course, any gift cards, like if your guy likes to stop at TA Petros or any of the other truck stops, most of them have a gift card you can buy that they can use out there on the road. Or, of course, also restaurants that they like to stop into.
Well, that's a great list. And, there's a theme there that I've been noticing, as my doctor would say, as you get older. But it's stuff that the trucker in your life can use, stuff that they might have a need for every day or at least occasionally, but something that they can use. And I think that's really that's a good way to kind of shop for gifts.
Absolutely. That's the way I like it now. Give me something I can use. You used to complain when you were a kid, you got socks and underwear. Well, guess what? If I need those, that's not a bad gift to get.
Absolutely. And I especially liked good quality truck GPS because, and boy, you've got to make sure it's a truck GPS because those everyday consumer ones are just not going to do the job for a trucker.
Absolutely. We want to stay as safe as we can, and we want to stay as legal as we can. And I still like to check against the truck GPS, with my regular atlas, that I still keep in the truck just to make sure that I'm not going on a road that maybe somebody misinputted in the computer.
There you go. There you go. Well, we've got a little bit of time left, Marty. Why don't you tell us where you're going after Beto Junction?
Yeah, we'll be over at the Sapp Brothers in Harrisonville, Missouri. We have gone to Sapp Brothers before, but not to this one, so that'll be a good time. They have an apple barrel restaurant and Dunkin' Donuts and Lucille's Famous Chicken. And we will be there the 18th and 19th, and that's I-49, exit 157. And it sounds like some of the crew from marketing may come down and visit during that stop.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I've been to that Sapp Brothers. It's a good little truck stop with a good little restaurant.
It really is.
Okay. Well, any final words before you head out, Marty?
Yeah, guys, just be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.